Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Overwatch Weekly. This week, however, is a very weird week because, well, there hasn't really been much news this past week. There's been one major story that I wanted to talk about, and it's really the only story that there is to talk about. Just I haven't really seen anything going on in terms of Overwatch news. It's been very, very, very slow, and that's for a couple of major reasons. One of the biggest ones, of course, is that we are just after BlizzCon, and typically after BlizzCon, things start to settle down because they've revealed what they needed to reveal, and now they're waiting to get everything prepared for the future. But the other thing is, it's late November. It's Thanksgiving time in the U.S. It's Christmas season. It's going to be New Year's soon. They don't spend as much time working during the week or around the holiday season as they do in other times of the year. So that's a big part of why we're not getting as much stuff. But there are a couple things that I want to talk about. One major story, but we're going to start with a story that's been going around. I've been seeing it on Reddit and Twitter for the most part. There was a French Overwatch player named Jules, who was a big supporter of the French Overwatch team, and he was very well known in the community for that. He had leukemia, and he unfortunately passed away a few days ago now. And there's a big push to try to get his portrait on the Paris map. He's a French person, and it's a kind of a big thing for him, and that's one of the things that people want. So I think it's a really great push. I've seen a lot of people in replies calling the guy toxic or whatever. I'm just like, okay, this is a kid, all right, a 14-year-old kid who had leukemia, and you're coming out and calling him out for being toxic. Like, what do you gain by doing that? Right? Even if he was toxic, right? He was a 14-year-old kid with leukemia. I'm sure, he had some stuff that he was dealing with and struggling with that you, as a player, do not struggle or deal with in your daily life. And, it's a whole thing that really just kind of annoyed me that people were in the replies talking about that. But if you want to see anything about it, I'll have a link in the description to a Reddit thread that I thought was very, very good. That kind of covered everything that there really was to the situation. It was very well done. So that's what there is for that. Now let's get to the juicy story that I have been really interested to talk about. So I normally don't talk about Overwatch League signings in Overwatch Weekly unless it's a very specific signing. And this is one of those situations where it's something very, very important that I wanted to share because it's really causing some controversy among people within the Overwatch League community. So I wanted to give my opinion on the whole thing, as well as share some other opinions on it and allow you as a person to come up with your own opinions on the matter and your own thoughts and whatnot. And that is the signing of ChipSa to the Philadelphia Fusion. And there's a lot of people who are happy with the signing. There's a lot of people who are upset about the signing. And I wanted to give both sides of the argument and kind of give my thoughts on the whole thing. So, Philadelphia Fusion announced yesterday that they had signed ChipSa. It was an interesting tweet. It was not one of the more. People were surprised. People were a little surprised. The tweet read, "What's it like when an Overwatch League team plays around a Doomfist? We're about to find out. Please welcome the greatest, least unlucky Doomfist in the world." And you have a video of just, him on his streams and whatnot, talking about everything that it is that he is worried about and concerned about and all that kind of stuff. So that's the position that, they just put it out, and that's where it ends, right? Right? No. The player who got or I guess not the player, the person in the community who got the most upset about this situation was Jane, former assistant coach of the Dallas Fuel, who had he did a little stream about it, and there's the whole thing. But ChipSa, of course, when he got signed, retweeted the Fusion announcement and just said, "Extremely excited to be joining Fusion as a DPS player. I love the team, and I'm looking forward to working with the players and staff." To which Jane retweeted it and said, "Must be really exciting to work with a team that your brother coaches. What a crazy coincidence." Further saying, "Be mad at me all you want for addressing the elephant in the room, but if the above is not a joke, then Fusion needs to do their due diligence and explain that picking up ChipSa for more deserving individuals was not unfairly influenced by his brother Christopher." Done. And then Jane just kept going and going and going. He did a Twitter live stream about it. And people were unfortunate, or people were upset about it. And it was interesting. And what is very interesting to me is the fact that you have teams and opinions that are interesting. But if you look into the situation around ChipSa signing, and the fact that you're saying, like, oh, they should have been looking to sign T2 and T3 players, like, they shouldn't have been looking into signing all of the players who are, just a streamer, right? Let's look into this, right? And look into this argument. And I'm gonna look at Tucker, who is I believe, he's the president of Fusion and some other teams in there as well. But he's the president of Fusion. And he tweeted out something about what Christopher said on Sideshow's stream, but he added to it. One of the first things is Sparkle as a player costs a lot more than ChipSa to sign. Okay, so they didn't have you're saying like, well, they should have signed a player like Sparkle. One, Sparkle's already on the team. Two, he's a much more expensive player. We don't know the money situation the Fusion are in right now. We can't just sit back and say, oh, the Fusion are swimming in money right now and can sign 1 million players. Okay, the Fusion, for all we know, the Fusion have almost no money left, and they wanted to have someone who could play Doomfist. ChipSa was the best option they could get with the amount of money they had to pay. The thing that I think is so annoying about Jane's argument and his complaint is that he doesn't know what's going on the inside. He's said in his live stream and whatnot that the Fusion aren't respected and all this other stuff. And it is what it is. Jane can have his opinions on the Fusion, and that could be true, that could not be true. Neptuno, who played for the Fusion, right? Neptuno, who actually was with the organization, said that everybody loves Christopher. He tweeted about the organization itself and how great the organization was, or not necessarily that, more so just about Christopher and how he felt that Christopher especially was getting all this hate. And I'll read the tweet that Neptuno tweeted out. And he quote tweeted Jane and said, "It's not a joke. It's not influenced by Chris. Tucker didn't even know they were brothers at the start. And also they don't need to explain anything they sign who they think deserves it." Right? And I've seen some people say they have an issue with Tucker not knowing that is what's going on. Okay, and maybe that is true. Maybe he should know that a player is related to a coach. That's understandable, right? Maybe that's something that should happen. Tucker's the president, okay? So there's a good chance that he doesn't know about these things right away. They have an assistant general manager and they have all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, it's his decision on who gets signed. Christopher doesn't make the decision on who gets signed, right? So I think that alone is kind of bizarre, right? But let's continue on with some of the other points that Tucker made because I want to make sure I cover all the stuff that he said. The second point is that another flex DPS creates a win-lose scenario we didn't need on the roster. Okay? If you have the flex DPS player and he is playing, well, then he's playing. If he's not playing, he's on the bench, and that's more harmful for his career if he's being benched. And if he's playing, he's harmful for somebody else's career, which is an important point. And I think that is, as a whole, very true. And I think there's a lot more to this than just having a player sitting on the bench, not having a player sitting on the bench, right? This season, travel is massive. So much of this season be about travel. And if you don't need to have a player with you at all times who can have their own way of doing what they want to do, which is stream, right? And you don't have to travel with this one player all the time, right? It's a good thing, okay? If there isn't a Doomfist meta, ChipSa doesn't need to be playing the Doomfist, right? But this team, based on where they were with what they had, needed a Doomfist player. It was the one spot that they felt that they needed, okay? We don't know how much money they had. We don't know how many players they trialed. What we know is they needed a Doomfist player, and they went with one who is one of the best Doomfists in the league, or in the world, in their opinion, who can be benched and doesn't have to play every game and doesn't have to travel every homestand and will still be just fine. You look at some of the players who've been benched in the past and how bad that's been. Sabiobi, when he wasn't playing in the 2019 season, he almost thought about retiring because to him it was like he loves to play and he wasn't getting the playtime. If you're going to tell me that there were any other players that the Fusion could have signed from the Tier 2 or Tier 3 scene that would have played ahead of a EQO or Carpe, you're crazy. They have the players that they feel will play ahead of EQO and Carpe, if at all, right? This team is not going to make a signing for a Tier 2 or Tier 3 player if signing that Tier 2 or Tier 3 player isn't worth it long term. ChipSa is a low-risk player, okay, that you sign because he brings to the table something you need, and that is a Doomfist player. He also gives you a lot more flexibility in how you use him as a player. If you don't need him playing, you're not hurting his career. Essentially, what the Fusion are admitting with this is, if they signed another DPS player who was just a flex DPS player who could play a ton of different roles, they would be in a bad position. Because if you look at the Fusion's roster, okay, they have a lot of DPS players. A lot. And you can't tell me that if you look at their DPS roster, you say, okay, well, they definitely don't have a ton of flex DPS players. Because they do. They really do. They have Ivy, who is a Genji, a Pharah player. You have Hisu, who is not old enough to play yet, but he will be in March. He plays Hit Scan, he plays with a Mickery, Ashe, Reaper, Zarya, right? Then you also have on this team Snillo, I think. They haven't announced him not being with the team anymore, but they also haven't announced him being with the team, so I don't really know. But he plays Tracer, and he's kind of a mixed bag as well with what he plays. I think that you look at this team, they already have a ton of DPS players. They don't need another flex DPS player who isn't going to get playtime. Okay? if you're going to sign a player to fill the one role you need, fill the role with the player that you think is the best Doomfist in the league or in the world. Sign a Doomfist that you don't think is risky to sign, and you use that player when you need him. And if you don't need him, then he just streams like he's been doing, right? It's a win-win situation for this organization. That's just the way I feel about it. The final thing I want to touch upon that Tucker mentioned, he also mentioned UK Mafia, but I don't think that's a good reasoning to sign a player because they're from the UK. That just seems like a bad reason anyway. But the other thing that I think is very, very, very big, and I think is really important, Jane can trash all he wants on the Philadelphia Fusion and their feeling towards Tier 2 and Tier 3. The Philadelphia Fusion, when it comes to their Tier 2, they had one of the best contenders teams in the world for most of 2018 and 2019. They had to move to Korea, and it changed some things up, and they were playing some not as competitive matches because they were not the same team. But they still did pretty well in Contenders Korea. They did okay. Now, they have to redo their Contenders roster and change some things up just based on the way that the Academy team rules and whatnot work for next season. But they have one of the best Tier 2 programs that we've seen since the Overwatch League started. Not only that, they're also in a partnership with a collegiate program, which is Harrisburg University, where Joe Meister is the head coach. They are also a very good program. So how can you sit here and say that the Philadelphia Fusion are, like abandoning, and they aren't paying attention at all to the Tier 2 and Tier 3 Overwatch scene when they have shown that they are one of the organizations who are committed to the Tier 2 and Tier 3 the Tier 2, Tier 3 scene in the past? They have shown it more than once that they are a team who will actually and actively support this Tier 2 and Tier 3 scene. But, that's not fun to call them out for the fact that they have done stuff in the past. And you can call it the fact that they didn't sign a player from Tier 2 or Tier 3. Atlanta Reign signed DeFran last year. And Dallas Fuel signed XQC 2 years ago. Okay. Once a year, a team has always signed a streamer, right? And yeah, maybe it is because it brings people in who want to enjoy them and watch them and support them, and maybe that is the case. Maybe that is exactly why it goes on, right? But at the end of the day, like, XQC was a solid player, as was DeFran. DeFran did very well when he was playing in the Overwatch League. I think what's going on here, I think, is problematic. I think what's going on here is an issue because I think that the problem is that we're looking for a reason to be upset, and I think that there are things to be upset about with what has gone on this offseason, and players who, yes, should have been given a chance and been given an opportunity. But we're not seeing what's going on behind the scenes. There's a lot more to this than just nepotism and Christopher wanting his brother on the organization and all that kind of stuff, right? You can't be serious in expecting them to have just not trialed any players, not even trialed ChipSa, and just said, we're just going to go and just sign him. Of course they trialed him. Of course they trialed other players. They weighed their pros and cons, and they felt this was the best move. Maybe they could they have signed a better player? Sure, probably. I mean, I'm sure there's better players out there they could have signed. But that wasn't what they were looking for. They were looking for someone to fulfill this one role. They got the person they wanted. And that's where we are. I don't have an issue with this. Maybe I should have more of an issue with this. I don't. Those are my thoughts on this whole situation. I'll have a link in the description down below to an Action Esports article that you can read that explains that. I'll have a link to Jane's tweet. I'll have a link to Tucker's tweets. I'll have a link to Neptuno's tweet. All that kind of stuff so you can read it for yourself and take a look at it and get your own thoughts and everything. That's just my opinion on the situation. And I'd love to hear your opinion about it in the comments down below. But if you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. But that's all I have for you today. So thank you for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'll see you all next time.